What if the most famous UFOs in history don't actually have engines? I mean, what if they don't push their way through space with rocket fuel, but instead they literally delete the space in front of them so they can continuously fall into the void?
Yeah, it sounds like magic. But when you look closely at the math, it's really just thermodynamics taken to its absolute extreme.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are attempting something incredibly ambitious. We're essentially doing an audio commentary on this highly classified style, incredibly dense slide deck.
Right, the one titled Entropic Metric Engineering.
Yes, exactly. And it is just packed with equations, diagrams, and honestly, some of the wildest concepts you'll ever encounter.
It really is. And because those slides are so notoriously terse, we're bridging the gaps using two massive background dossiers.
Right.
One of them covers the physical lore of UFOs, specifically Bob Lazar's alleged sport model from Area 51's S4 facility, and Billy Meyer's infamous Swiss Pleiadian beam ship photographs.
Which are legendary on their own.
Oh, absolutely. And then the other dossier dives into the bleeding edge of theoretical physics. So we're talking emergent gravity and the consciousness models of Jocko Grinberg.
Now, if you're listening to this and your head is already spinning at the idea of emergent gravity mingling with flying saucers, just, stick with us. You really do not need to be a theoretical physicist to grasp this. Our mission today is to slow down, be a bit philosophical, and unpack exactly how this technology supposedly works.
Yep, just looking at the blueprints, so to speak.
So let's jump right in. The opening of this deck, it doesn't start with aliens. It starts by juxtaposing two completely different worlds on the first couple of slides.
Right on slide 1 and 2.
Yeah. On one side, it outlines the waveguide engineering of that S4 sport model, the one allegedly reverse engineered in the U.S. starting in 1945. And on the other side, it lists emergent gravity.
Which is, modern, accepted theoretical physics, championed by people like Erik Verlinde.
Right. And the central question the deck poses right away is, what if these two things are describing the exact same thermodynamic process?
Which is just a brilliant way to frame it, because the background texts note something very strange. The S4 craft described in Nevada and the beam ships photographed by a farmer in Switzerland, they look practically identical, lacking any visible seams, rivets, or, traditional propulsion exhausts. From an engineering standpoint, they look less like spaceships and more like perfectly polished resonant cavities.
Right. They look like tuning forks. And that physical shape makes total sense when the deck drops its first massive claim on slide 3 regarding the fuel.
Element 115.
Exactly.
Right.
It says the power source, element 115, isn't just a heavy metal. The document actually calls it a synthetic, engineered, near-extremal black hole.
Which is quite a phrase.
It really is. Okay, let's pause here because that sounds like a sci-fi buzzword salad to me. Let me try an analogy to see if I'm getting this.
Go for it.
It sounds like instead of a gas tank, the core of this ship is like a perfectly sealed quantum thermos.
Okay, I like that.
Right. So it's holding an incredibly hot cup of coffee, which is massive amounts of raw information, but it's holding it in an absolute zero temperature stasis.
That is actually a surprisingly accurate way to visualize it. But to understand the why behind your quantum thermos, we have to look at slide 4 and what the dossier calls the island formula.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Yeah.
Because honestly, how can a black hole sit inside a spaceship without sucking the ship into oblivion?
It comes down to something called a mass gap. In the physics of near-extremal black holes, which are, black holes spinning incredibly fast or carrying an extreme electrical charge, the event horizon acts as an intense buffer.
A buffer, okay.
Yeah. Inside, there is an island of maximally entangled information. But that information cannot escape because of the mass gap.
Like a physical moat.
Exactly like a moat. It's a minimum energy threshold.
Yeah.
If a fluctuation doesn't have enough energy to cross that moat, it just stays inside. The information doesn't evaporate. Map that theoretical physics onto chemistry. Element 115, moscovium, theoretically sits in what chemists call the island of stability. It's a region where superheavy isotopes are perfectly balanced and they don't immediately radioactively decay. So the synthesis this deck is making is that the microscopic black hole and the superheavy isotope are functionally the same exact thing. They exist in perfectly stable stasis. They hold unimaginable energy totally quiet.
Until they are deliberately provoked, which is the obvious next question, right? If you have this perfectly sealed thermos of energy, how do you open it to fly a ship?
Right, you need a key.
And that requires a physical provocation. And slide 5 outlines the mechanics of this beautifully. It shows a miniature particle accelerator bombarding this element 115 core with protons.
Yeah, and it's important to understand the mechanism here. By firing a proton into element 115, you bump it up to element 116.
You force it out of the island of
Yeah,
stability.
you push it out, and element 116 is highly unstable. It instantly decays, and when it does, it releases antimatter.
And the math provided in the background text for this reaction is just, it's terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
A 100% efficient matter-antimatter annihilation creates roughly 9 times 10 to the 13th joules of energy per gram. We are talking about Hiroshima-level power from a single gram of material.
But here's the thing. The heat isn't what powers the ship in a traditional sense.
Right, we aren't boiling water to turn a turbine.
No, not at all. This violent thermal bath acts as the provocation we talked about. The massive burst of heat forces that perfectly stable quantum island to breach the mass gap.
It spills over the moat.
Yes. It starts to bleed out purified information. And the text gives this leaking information a very specific name. The gravity O wave.
The gravity wave. Okay, so now we have this raw bleeding wave of gravity inside the ship.
Yeah.
But how does that actually move a ship?
Right, we have to direct it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the next diagrams on slide 6 show the shape of the reactor itself, calling it entropic impedance matching. But the geometry is what's bizarre. You have this wedge of element 115 sitting inside a truncated cone, and that cone is suspended inside a hemisphere. Now, looking at this, it's essentially the exact same shape as the cone inside a loudspeaker.
Because it is a waveguide. And just like acoustic or electromagnetic engineering, a truncated cone efficiently matches a high-density energy source to a low-density media. If you didn't have the cone, the energy would reflect back on itself and the ship would instantly vaporize.
So it's acting as a megaphone for gravity.
It's a megaphone for entropy, which, as we'll see, is pretty much the same thing. But to truly understand how this megaphone pushes the ship, the dossier connects this to Jarmo Michaela's emergent gravity physics.
Right.
Specifically, something called the Unruh temperature.
Unruh temperature. I thought we were talking about gravity and acceleration. How does temperature, how does heat suddenly become physical acceleration?
That is the crucial flip in this entire theory. The standard Unruh effect states that if you accelerate fast enough through the quantum vacuum, you will experience a thermal bath. You will actually feel heat.
Okay, so acceleration creates heat.
Yes. But what Michaela and this slide deck propose is reversing the arrow of that equation.
Oh, wow.
Right. If acceleration creates heat, then engineering a massive, highly specific thermal gradient like the one we just created with our antimatter reaction can induce macroscopic acceleration.
That's wild.
The cone organizes the chaotic subatomic noise of that antimatter explosion. It acts as an acceleration surface, turning quantum probability into a highly directional entropic gradient.
So it's literally tricking the universe.
Mm-hmm.
It's creating the heat signature of acceleration, so the universe says, oh, we must be accelerating, and it physicalizes the force.
Tricking the universe is a phenomenal way to put it. You are literally turning quantum data into a physical directional force.
Okay, but if this cone is blasting out a localized gravity wave with the power of a nuclear bomb, what stops the ship from just ripping itself apart? Or ripping the surrounding environment apart, for that matter?
That's where the hole comes in. Slide 7 describes a seamless metamaterial superconductor acting as an event horizon buffer.
Event horizon buffer. Earlier, I was thinking of this like a recording studio trapping sound, but that metaphor really doesn't work here, does it? It's more like a perfect Faraday cage, or maybe a one-way mirror.
A one-way mirror is much, much closer. The text actually calls it a redshift firewall. Because the hull has no seams, there is no phase leakage. The intense gravitational field inside the ship stretches the wavelength of light and information. That's the redshift.
Oh, yeah.
It stretches it so much that the internal energy simply cannot interact with the outside universe. The ship completely isolates itself.
So it essentially cuts itself out of the universe's fabric. It becomes this wandering, self-contained macro particle operating on its own local time in its own gravity scale.
Which is absolutely necessary for the final propulsion step shown on slide 8.
Right. The deck details these 3 transducers at the base of the craft. They take this amplified gravity wave and shift its phase to create destructive interference. And this is where my mind just melts. Because the ship doesn't shoot anything out the back. There is zero thrust.
None at all. And to explain why, the background text leans really heavily on Erik Verlinde's entropic gravity.
Yeah.
Verlinde proved mathematically that gravity might not be a fundamental force like electromagnetism. Instead, gravity is an elastic thermodynamic response to entropy. Think of space-time as a highly stretched rubber band that desperately wants to equalize information.
So nature abhors a vacuum. And not just a vacuum of air, but a vacuum of information.
Yes, when those three transducers create destructive interference, they are creating a localized point of zero entropy. They engineer an information void just outside the hull. And because space-time cannot tolerate a void, it violently rushes in to fill it.
Meaning the craft is continuously falling into a localized space-time well that it creates just millimeters in front of itself. It deletes the space ahead, and the universe pulls the ship forward to fix the hole.
It's surfing a wave of engineered probability.
If you're listening and feeling a bit overwhelmed by the phrase engineered probability, take a breath, because it actually gets wilder.
It really does.
Everything we just discussed is the physical hardware. But when the deck shifts to the underlying mathematics around slide 9, we hit a wall that completely redefines the whole system. The section is called metric engineering.
Right, and unpacks something called two-metric formalism, or FG theory.
Yeah, and the math shows the standard gravitational constant, g, being replaced by a strong gravity constant, g. This new constant makes gravity millions of times stronger. Now, hold on. I was taught gravity is a fundamental constant. You can't just swap out a letter in Einstein's equation to make a spaceship fly. That's just bad math, isn't it?
Well, in standard general relativity, you certainly cannot, but that assumes gravity is driven strictly by mass. Metric engineering explores what happens when gravity is driven by the strong nuclear force.
Which is that gravity, a wave leaking from our core.
Exactly. In this model, gravity is no longer treated as a static constant. It is treated as a dynamic, controllable wave.
By adding a phase factor.
Yes. By introducing a phase factor to the equation, gravity becomes an engineered variable. You can literally steer it. You are bridging Schrödinger's quantum wave mechanics directly with macroscopic spacetime.
Which begs the ultimate question here. Who is doing the steering? If gravity is a dynamic wave that requires a phase shift to move the ship, how do you control that? Do you use a joystick?
A steering wheel.
A physical throttle? But the deck reveals on slide 10 that the pilot of this craft doesn't use manual controls at all. The pilot's biological brain acts as its own quantum core.
This is where the dossier integrates the work of the late Mexican neurophysiologist Jaco Grinberg, and it completely shifts the paradigm from mechanical engineering to consciousness.
It's a huge pivot. The text outlines Grinberg's syntretic theory. He proposed that the underlying structure of the universe is an invisible holographic web he called the lattice.
The lattice, right?
It's a pre-geometric space of pure information, and the deck maps the engineering of the spacecraft perfectly onto human biology.
The symmetry is haunting, really, when you look at slide 11. The element 115 core, sitting in its quantum stasis, maps directly to a highly coherent human brain. The leaking gravity aeroid maps to Grinberg's concept of transfer potential, which is the measurable energy of focused consciousness. And the spacetime well the ship creates, that maps perfectly to the pre-space lattice.
Wait, practically speaking, how does a human brain physically steer a metal saucer? I mean, are they wearing a helmet covered in wires? Are there electrodes tapping into their skull?
That's the most profound part. There are no wires. Grinberg defines synchrony as a state of extreme neurological coherence, a blend of synthesis and energy. When a human brain achieves massive coherence, its electromagnetic field acts exactly like the element 115 core. The brain becomes a resonant cavity.
So the ship and the pilot are essentially two tuning forks.
Precisely. Through macroscopic quantum entanglement, the pilot's highly structured consciousness projects an interference pattern. The ship doesn't read wires, it resonates with the pilot's neural field. The ship's hardware simply amplifies the pilot's intention, physicalizing that pattern into the space-time well. The pilot and the ship become a single, unified quantum system.
Which leads to the most stunning summary statement in the entire deck on slide 12. The craft is not a machine. It is a programmable, localized phase transition. The matter of the fuel becomes information, which becomes an entropy gradient, which becomes gravity.
And it suggests that consciousness isn't just a byproduct of evolution. It is a functional, physical force that can bend the architecture of space-time.
It fundamentally challenges our definition of what a vehicle even is. But it also forces us to ask a terrifying historical question. If this technology is real, and it relies on both cutting-edge wave mechanics and biological syntropy, where on Earth did it come from?
Or off-Earth, as the case may be.
Right. And the final section of the deck, slides 13 through 15, lays out a deeply controversial timeline. It starts in 1926 when Erwin Schrödinger and Louis de Broglie established wave mechanics.
Right.
The theory proposed here is that German scientists mastered this mathematics, completely bypassed Newtonian rockets, and secretly developed solid-state gravity by 1945.
And we really have to look impartially at how the background dossiers handle this, because they present two competing origins and they deliberately don't force you to choose one. On the extraterrestrial side, you have the claims that Lazar's S4 craft came from the Zeta Reticuli star system and Meyer's beam ships came from the Pleiades. But on the terrestrial side, you have the theory that this was strictly captured German wave mechanic technology.
Brought over after the war.
Exactly. Brought to the U.S. via Operation Paperclip, which would perfectly explain the intense military secrecy at S4, while a breakaway civilian group continued testing it in the Swiss Alps, which completely accounts for the Meyer sightings.
And the dossier points out a deeply eerie cultural detail about those Meyer sightings. Billy Meyer famously claimed his Pleiadian alien contact was a woman named Semjase, and she perfectly fit the area aesthetic of 1940s Germany, tall, blonde, Nordic.
Yes, and the texts present a really fascinating psychological question here. If the technology is entirely human, the whole Pleiadian space sister narrative might just be the ultimate psychological operation.
A cover story.
Right. It's a brilliant cover story to hide human technological supremacy by repackaging a 1940s German aesthetic into a benevolent New Age alien myth.
But conversely, if the alien story is true, it suggests a bizarre, almost disturbing overlap between extraterrestrial biology and mid-century human ideologies.
Exactly. The documents leave that tension entirely unresolved. They present both the extraterrestrial and terrestrial narratives purely as lenses through which to view the identical hardware.
Regardless of who built it, the physics implications in the final slides are earth-shattering. The deck concludes that the information paradox is solved macroscopically.
Which is huge for physicists.
Yeah. We don't need to look at a supermassive black hole at the center of a galaxy to study Hawking radiation. We just need a super heavy waveguide reactor in a laboratory. It concludes that gravity is essentially an illusion, just a localized thermodynamic response. And most importantly, it concludes that reality itself is participatory.
Which is the ultimate paradigm shift. In this model, consciousness is not a passive observer trapped in a mechanical universe. Through high synergy, the human mind is the ultimate phase shifter.
One of the final quotes encapsulates it so perfectly. To build a flying saucer is to build a pocket universe. You aren't conquering gravity by brute force, pushing rocket fuel against the air. You are conquering it by rewriting the information of space itself.
It really makes our current rockets look like we're trying to cross the ocean by violently throwing rocks behind a rowboat.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, let's take a collective breath and recap this incredible journey. We started with an engine that isn't an engine at all. It's a synthetic black hole made of element 115, sealed like a perfectly quiet quantum thermos. We explored how a tiny particle accelerator provokes it, causing it to bleed purified information. We saw how a truncated cone acts as a megaphone, tricking the universe into creating physical acceleration out of heat.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We looked at how a seamless one-way mirror of a hull acts as a redshift firewall, cutting the ship out of normal spacetime. And finally, we saw how a highly coherent biological brain entangles with the ship to steer this holographic lattice.
It completely dismantles the Newtonian worldview we all grew up with.
Exactly. And why should you, the listener, care about any of this?
I mean, even if you never pilot a flying saucer or believe a single word of UFO lore, these concepts are actively rewriting how modern physicists view the reality you are sitting in right now. Emergent gravity, the island formula, the synergic lattice. These aren't just science fiction tropes anymore. They are the bleeding edge of how humanity is beginning to understand the very fabric of existence.
And if we take Jacobo Grinberg's theories to their ultimate logical conclusion, it leaves us with a truly profound thought to explore on our own.
I love where this is going. Lay it on us.
Well, if the universe truly is a pre-geometric holographic lattice and a high-coherence human consciousness can bend it to steer a physical ship, then your brain is already a localized gravity well of information. Which means every time you truly connect with another person, every time you experience deep empathy or a shared aha moment, are you merely exchanging words? Or are you creating a microscopic wormhole? Are you generating a transferred potential that literally, physically warps the fabric of reality between you and that other person?
So the next time you look up at the stars, or even just look at the person sitting across from you, remember the universe might not be a collection of clean, visible, mechanical parts. It might just be a murky, beautiful sea of information waiting for you to shift its phase.